And we're live. Okay, so as I was saying, what my wife, because we're talking about anxiety and those kinds of things, and my wife is a very anxious person, as is. When I told her that's what we're going to be talking about, she went, "Do you want to do like a prep hour with me and me just tell you about anxiety in the workplace? Because I'm full of it. I do this all the time. But one of the things that in general I'm kind of feeling sometimes what I hear as the advice for anxiety is people are like, "Oh, you're anxious. Maybe you're not anxious. You're actually just excited." And it's this nervousness that you have before a big talk. And I'm like, "Okay, if you have rapid breathing, your heart rate is through the roof and you're sweating in the middle of the night, a little mind trick is not what's going to help you in that moment." That's that's there are
Mhm,
more
mhm.
things that are at play than just a simple "you're not excited about your life enough" kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's true. Well,
So,
and one of the things about anxiety is that it really does carry with it a lot of somatic complaints. And the somatic complaints is a word for physical sensations, physical things that happen and you wonder why. Because one of the things that happens with people is when they internalize some of their feelings and some of their stress and other kinds of things, it will actually lead to the body sort of kind of talking back at them in some ways. And so you end up with hives, or you end up with heart palpitations, or you end up feeling short of breath. So that is not unusual. We've heard about it all the time. And helping people be aware, a lot of times there's something about making something that is unconscious or something we're not thinking of and putting a focus on it and bringing it into the light that can help with that. And then there's the strategies, the numerous strategies that and trying to figure out which ones will work to help people manage their stress and anxiety. And of course, this time of year is perfect for us to be having that conversation because so many people have that going on right now. How many command performances are they doing? How many dinners are they hosting? How many of them are they attending? And life is moving on around us. So it's a pretty busy time of year, and it's a contemplative time of year as well, I believe, because we're coming to the end of one year and we're about to renew and start a new year. So
and so many of us facing all the New Year's resolutions that were done before January even ended of last year. And what am I going to do this year? And I keep on forgetting the exact numbers of the percentages around that, but we won't get into people not meeting their New Year's resolutions. We're not there yet. We need to talk about anxiety of the holidays and running a business and family in the middle of all this kind of stuff. Quick question before we dive into all these things. In general, I know where you and I are going to be talking about anxiety, especially the shit we don't talk about when it comes to anxiety and how it feels. Are there sort of techniques or things or tips that you frequently hear either online or anywhere like that where you go, "Don't, that's silly. Don't do that. That's not really going to help you. That's a band-aid or you're covering up a symptom and not an actual problem." Anything along those lines. Do you have something like that?
I think that a lot of people think that they have managed something when in fact what's happened is that they've avoided it. Or I believe that I see people who are kind of self-medicating. And I think when they not and I might get controversy here about a medical marijuana card, but when they instituted the medical marijuana card, it made it okay for some people to do some self-medicating. And one of the things that I find after treating dual diagnosis, which is depression, anxiety with a substance, or some secondary condition, that when they may have some benefits from the marijuana, meaning they might sleep a little better, they might take the edge off. But then if they don't have that marijuana, they're really irritable. Like I've seen that
Mm.
happen, and especially if they're in a program where they're getting tested and they're not allowed to have that for one reason or another. At the same time, plenty of people have that medical marijuana card now, making it okay for them. And not even probation or other types of actions can tell them that they can't. So, and are they really treating? Are they really getting to the bottom of it or moving toward mental wellness? I don't necessarily judge that. If that's the way they function, that's how they function. It's just that I don't think that it really deals with what is the source of the anxiety.
Mhm.
So,
let me put
yeah.
out an idea here for you, because this seems, I love dealing with concepts. I have a quote that is, the concepts are few, but the methods are many. Most of the time, people try to sell us methods, but it's, are you following the main concept? And so there's been an interesting concept that's been developing for me over the last few years, and that's, we keep on trying to add things to fix problems as opposed to subtract things to fix problems. And most of the
Mm,
time, we actually need to subtract things to fix most of the problems in our lives. It sounds like what you're saying with, be it medical marijuana, or in my case, I'm actually thinking I have these zero caffeine, 0 calorie sodas that I drink sometimes,
mhm,
where I'm like, I do this because it makes me feel good. But if I do it too much and then I don't have one, I'm cranky. I'm like, that's a problem. You're using it as a
mhm.
crutch and you're not actually dealing with the problem. You're trying to add a solution of a quick dopamine hit or whatever it might be for you. So, is that what you're also kind of saying, that you are trying to add this extra thing on top to try to kind of solve it with the marijuana or whatever other thing, but you're not taking away the actual source of the anxiety. And therefore, when this addition goes away, it's almost this, I don't want to, this is probably an inappropriate use of the word, but almost a relapse back into, oh, this was really bad. I'm now going to feel even worse, kind of a feel, almost like a rubber band effect.
Yeah, I think that that could be true. And sometimes do people make find a way that works for them, that they're really satisfied with? And that's why I don't judge it. I think that maybe they do. I'm not saying that they couldn't. And I think that the what you're saying is also true about really taking something away rather than adding more things, because sometimes it can distract from what's really going on there. There is this idea that, there's not more to it, there's less, there's a simplicity there, you know, and we
Mhm.
do a lot of stuff to go roundabout. And again, I think it comes from that avoidance that can be associated with it when it's time to take care of ourselves, when it's time to eat right, or it's time to read and study more, or whatever the things are that people are wanting to do, but they have a gimmick, it becomes gimmicky. And then, of course, they have people who are there saying, try this, do this, here, you can purchase this, and that will solve all the problems. And while I believe that many people who are out there really have good intentions and they have good things that have worked for them and different things like that, for some people though, they actually will kind of make it more complicated and make the journey a little longer, take a little
Mhm.
longer to really live a healthy life. And I'm going to manage anxiety, or I'm going to manage stress. It's a natural part of living, rather than saying things like, oh, there's something really wrong here. And I think that that's the beginning of what I hear people saying, is that they're saying there is something wrong, and I'm not at all discounting that there could be a medical condition. There could actually be something. Although, it's interesting, at one time earlier in my career, I would refer, Steve, to a psychiatrist if I thought that there was something chemically going on. Now I'm more likely to refer to the primary care, or the regular MD, the regular doctor, because there are also medical conditions. They are bona fide medical conditions, and one of the symptoms that they have may be anxiety. It's just the kind of thing that it just goes along with it, and people wouldn't really know that unless you, I guess, looked it up, whatever. And it's another type of health condition, not considered to be mental health, and that just shows that there can be a connection. And some of those people that I would be talking to are people who haven't had blood work done, people who have it in a long time. They haven't had an examination, and so they really don't know what's going on. And I think that one of the things that I talk about is really removing the stigma around talking about this particular topic, because it is some of the things that we don't talk about. And then the other part of it is being proactive rather than reactive. And if there is like one way that I could sum up an error that I see people having, Steve, it would be that they are reactive. They don't think that there is anything going on until there is something happening to them, and it's kind of serious. It's at that point, then they can't go to work every day, or then they are not able to meet all their obligations, and then they're forced to take time off, and they actually reduce productivity and then reduce some of the things that are most important to them. And of course that creates this cycle where they don't feel any better. In fact, they feel worse, because they're not producing. So that's just something that I happen to have known about or seen, sometimes is that let's check out your health. Let's make sure that there's wellness. Let's make sure that we're practicing healthy skills, spending time around healthy people, you know. Yeah.
So this is where I would love to dig into kind of almost a piece of the reality of the situation to a degree. Um, I think the fact that we need to be proactive versus reactive in healthcare and in so many parts of our lives is true, as a knowledge base, but not as a reality, and that's not how most people operate. Now, be that because we don't have time, we don't have the money, we don't care because we're like, it's working well enough. Whatever it may be, that part doesn't really matter. But I'm sort of curious, especially during this super busy time. People are really, really feeling this as well. But okay, budget is super rigid. You're not going to have a whole bunch of money. Going in and paying another $75 for a copay and then maybe having to see a therapist 3 times or 2 times a week or 1 time a week. But now you're adding up hundreds and hundreds of dollars every single month that you don't have. And you're going, okay, I literally do not have this money. I know I'm
Mhm,
supposed to take care of myself and take time off work,
mhm,
but if I take time off work, I'm not making more money because I'm taking time off work. I now no longer have the extra money that I didn't already have to begin with to spend on this healthcare and taking care of myself. How in the world am I supposed to do that? Like I couldn't possibly do this.
mhm,
I I'm just going to
mhm,
keep grinding until it gets bad and I'm forced into it because it feels like I have no other way off of this hamster wheel. I'm not really necessarily
mhm,
asking you what's the solution because I don't know if there is a solution. I'm more wondering
mhm.
thoughts, comments. Have you seen these situations? Anything helpful around that?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is that we want to start by making our lives therapeutic, and that's proactive. In other words, what can you do without spending any money right now that would make a difference for you that you could implement? What are some of the things that you're willing to try? What are some ways that you could connect with support? One of the things, if I'm getting ready to discharge somebody, let's say they came in for depression management, anxiety management, I always want to see before I do that an increase in their healthy support system. Because when people have a healthy support system, it makes their life sustainable. And at the beginning in therapy, if they come in for therapy or they come in for coaching, they're basically getting the support of the person that they're coming in with. And then the other thing that I do is, and this is a thinking mechanism that I put in. It's what they call cognitive restructuring, and I really help them work with the negative thoughts. And I start pretty early in my work with somebody because I want them to train their thinking, and it's going to take a bit of time to do. I do it with them in session. I ask them to do it in between, and I make sure that they have that ability to get access to the skill. And the first thing that I ask them is, what is the evidence for what you're thinking? Time, money, etc. And they're going to give me evidence. And I say, now you want to really work with the evidence because one of the things about the evidence is that it validates that you are not going crazy and you are not making this up. There is something there that is really genuine and really real. Because the goal of cognitive restructuring is never to say abandon a negative thought or a negative belief. It's never to do that. But those negative thoughts, if they're left unchecked, can actually pull down and then put people in a spiral and do other kinds of things that are not don't feel good. So we ask them to please give themselves that bit of validation. Now, sometimes if there's a relationship issue or other things, like with somebody that I worked with, there's an EDC carnival. They have it in California. It's a very popular one. Somebody I worked with got engaged, and her fiance went to that carnival. She had a lot of evidence for why she felt the way she did when she got anxiety about him going. And they became, excuse me, they became talking points in her relationship. They became data or something to use to really being newly engaged. Our relationship's going to change some. How do we want that to change? Because she didn't want to be like her mom, who she witnessed a very tight rein on her partners, tightly linked together, where they couldn't go do anything. And she didn't want to be that way, but she wanted to talk about these other things that were provoking her anxiety, being newly engaged. The relationship changed from a dating relationship into a committed relationship per se, as a result of that. And so, the next step, getting engaged. So I think that there can be evidence that is important for us to notice that we're not making this up. There is something there, and it is a valid point of view. And then the next thing that I ask people to do is there evidence contrary? And all I'm wanting to do is have them widen the lens on their thinking. And the reason that I say that is because they can realize my point of view can also exist alongside another point of view. And then we open it up even further and we say, what would a trusted friend or somebody who is knowledgeable that you respect, what would they say about it? And that would be the neutral point of view. It wouldn't be, the positive or the negative. It would just be kind of in the middle. So then again, expanding that thinking, expanding that wide lens. And then the third thing is the question is, if they were to look at the situation positively, how would things be different? And then what they get is the ability to loosen up a little bit, and they can still go with whatever is going on that might have initially been negative. They can still have that, but realizing that there's a scope actually creates more reasonable, more rational thinking, and it actually lowers anxiety and stress ultimately.
That is it. Well, it's such a good step by step thing that we can even do for ourselves of kind of in the moment going,
Mhm.
okay, what I am feeling, what I am thinking negatively about, I have a reason to think negatively about. Here's my evidence that I believe that this is the negative parts. Is there evidence to the other thing? And you can kind of play devil's advocate, which is my favorite role to play in most arguments in general. But anyway, I should do that more with myself. Is are there things to the contrary? And then saying, okay, well, why can't it necessarily be this? Let's view this from a more positive kind of standpoint. I think it's
Yeah.
a
And then
great way. Yeah, go.
there's one other thing that we do, and we put a time frame on it. Will this matter in X? Because one of the things that we find with anxiety provoking thoughts, the shelf life is much shorter. And a lot of times, a minute or two after that stressor, the speech or the meeting or whatever it is they're obsessed with or anxious about, the stress goes away. They may find something else to stress about, but that's anxiety. And then with a negative thought, that it can persist a little bit longer. But when we put a time frame on it, we also let them know that there's not a permanence to it. You're feeling uncomfortable right now, but you're not always going to feel that way. And then that opens them up to this possibility that they're going to feel better, and at some point there will be relief, if that makes sense. So that's another thing too. We're kind of suggesting with that particular question for people who have anxiety provoking thoughts or negative thoughts, that there's going to be relief in sight. And of course, people love that, and it does calm them, even if it doesn't seem like it calms them extremely or often, like immediately, but there's something they can rest assured or look forward to. So yeah.
It reminds me of I go back to this clip so many times in my head. I don't necessarily rewatch it nearly as many times. It's a clip of Tom Hanks, and it's all these actors sitting around, and they're talking about the quote, "This too shall pass." And what I love is that it's that he goes, "This too shall pass," where most people, like you said, they want to know that there's a relief that, hey, this bad thing, this too shall pass. But he's like, but realize that quote also means you're feeling good right now. You're feeling great and amazing and on top of the world. This too shall pass. And there's this, there is a timeline and a deadline to everything. And I'm glad that you
Mhm.
mentioned that because you've had a lot more experience with this, and I understand. I've been in healthcare. The answer, it depends, is ever prevalent in most of these, but we may think, okay, I have the evidence. I looked at the evidence. I tried to switch my evidence, thought about it positively. Okay, I feel better. And then tomorrow, it's back. And then the next day, it's back. And our partners or other people may go, I thought you dealt with it. You did the evidence thing. You thought about it positively. Aren't you fixed? Aren't you cured?
Mhm.
Um, in your experience, and I'm not necessarily trying to say how long does it take, because I know you're going to say it really depends on the thing. It depends on the person. There's so many things. But can you give us maybe even sort of how does the hero's journey, if you would, sort of go for the person in terms of you will have dips, you will have valleys. You may think you fixed it for 3 years, and all of a sudden somebody just mentions a name and it's back. Can you tell us a little more about that experience of going through those evidence things, thinking positively, and trying to solve this over time?
I think that the way a lot of mental health is, and I remember saying this to parents of children with ADHD, you're going to see a decrease in the duration, the frequency, and the intensity of whatever's happening. And that is a progression to help people know that things are getting better, things are healing. In other words, that's the way you would more measure it in terms of a bigger picture. What is the duration of the anxiety? What is the intensity and what is the frequency? The other thing that I also believe is that if we're installing things in, and I work heavily with people on this idea of having a good morning routine, having a good evening routine. In fact, I get teased a lot. If I ever write a message to somebody or speak to somebody after I've done my morning gratitude, I am more than likely going to say something like, I am filled with gratitude. And I'm only hoping I say it in circles where they understand that, because you definitely don't want to walk out the street on the street in the, at the gas station and say to somebody, I'm filled with gratitude. It's kind of weird and wonky, but the point is that we program and we condition. We have good morning routines, we have good evening routines, and we start to put that, and that's the proactive piece. And then again, but still measuring if we're working on it, because some people have some things that are kind of sticky. Like we want people to talk and release, because that I teach people a lot in my program. Expression is number one. Outlets are number two. Expression is talking about it, singing about it, writing about it, dancing about it, making art about it. Those things. Outlets are the things that naturally release tension and allow you to kind of focus on your thoughts and feelings. For some people, that's cross stitch. For other people, that's listening to the radio. It just depends. And then the last thing, and this is a heavy area, probably the meaty area where it's engagement. I work with people on how they engage with their thoughts and feelings. I work with people on how they engage with people, places, and things around them. So we hit the internal and the external. And sometimes there's a need to go in deeper and go into the past and find out what's going on historically and what's happening there, so that there can be a release. And then, of course, sometimes the release involves being able to let go of some things, but then other things are a little sticky. And so they need a little more work. They need a little gentle bit of loosening by continuing to work on them. And I teach those techniques for doing that, not only from a psychotherapeutic point of view, but also in a coaching situation. I teach it so that they can learn to apply it and they can begin to do that in their everyday life. And it makes a difference for people profoundly. They report back that it really does help a lot. So
I'm really glad you mentioned the systems and the morning routine, evening routine. I don't necessarily think plenty of people have already discussed. Obviously, you said gratitude, waking up at the same time, meditation can be helpful. We don't necessarily need to go into those things. I have a slightly different question for you. I'm gonna get vulnerable
sure.
with the audience. They're gonna get to see a little bit inside my head. So I want to talk a little bit more about sort of a loop where you think you're doing a good thing from one side, but it feeds into a bad thing from the other side. And to give it a little bit more of a
Mhm.
specific example, since we're around the holidays and Turkey Day was yesterday. So I definitely have body image issues where I'm going, oh, I'm too overweight. I don't like the way that I look. My partner, therefore, probably doesn't like the way I look, which, by the way, the whole evidence back and forth, complete BS. She likes the way that I look, but yeah, anyway. Um, but then if I'm super stressed, so that's happening on one side of this body image thing. But then if I'm stressed at work, I've had a bunch of client meetings. It's been a lot. We have a 2-year-old. He's stressing me out. And at the end of it all, I'm going, I just want pizza. I'm gonna eat pizza because it's been a stressful day. While that is helpful and it gives me that great feeling and reward at the end of the day because it's been a stressful day from a mental capacity, it is then afterwards that I feel terrible because it is now looped in and fueling negatively the capacity of body image and all these things, giving me anxiety that my partner's no longer going to want to be with me and things like that.
Mhm.
So in that way, you could use that example or just generally talk about these kind of loops where you think a solution is a solution to one source of stress and anxiety, but it's creating stress on another level. And how do you end up
Mhm.
balancing those?
Well, so one of the things that there is a cycle there, and part of what it involves is the thing that wants people to go toward the thing that will then give them the residual guilt or the residual experience that is kind of a letdown. So there's two ways to look at it. One of them is that you can just enjoy pizza and learn to do it without the guilt, Or the other thing is you can say to yourself, well, if I eat that pizza, I'm going to experience a sense of guilt. And do I really need to do that for myself? Do I really need to do it in that way? And maybe you'll pick a healthier choice. Maybe you will say to yourself, you'll eat something healthier because you're looking at the gratification. Are you going to get instant gratification, or is it going to be a delayed gratification? The other thing though is, and I'm not at all saying to people don't eat the pizza, because just eat the pizza and then learn to release that guilt, learn to give that up and explore where that comes from, and learn to be gentle with that. There's a lot of self-compassion in this process. Ultimately, when we're talking about going into how that is all wired together. And sometimes there's something very tender. And that's why people go into those cycles where they feel like it's almost like how people have described it. Clients have, it's almost like a little slap that they give themselves. Like, it's not okay to enjoy things because they are going to get overweight. And some of that could be as simple as things that they learned in their family about weight and about, values, and just things that got communicated as a little kid, who was a really good little kids are really good receptors for information, and they internalize that stuff. So, and I've had people who even aren't even overweight and they have exactly the experience that you're talking about. It's actually pretty common. And and the whole thing about it is, maybe what you're needing to release is not the craving for pizza, but the guilt, this guilt, and really allowing yourself to, and that means you eat the pizza and then you release the guilt. That it gives you the opportunity to practice releasing guilt, and then again figuring out what it is that makes it stick. And that will be one that I have found, Steve, is what I call sticky. It will stick around. It's not easily released, because it's deeply ingrained and tied to other things, and
Mhm.
sometimes it is about a core belief or a core issue, in terms of how we're mentally processing the world around us, how we learn to process it. And of course, if you look at psychology, the basics of psychology, they sort of say that the ego gets constructed on things like, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough. It's not things like, I'm a beautiful child flower of the universe. It's more the other. So
Interesting.
yeah, so there's a lot to decide there in terms of what you want. Would you like to be able to enjoy some pizza every so often? Or would you like to be able to make a healthier choice than the pizza, sometime when you have that urge, or you want to enjoy, like, meaning you're rewarding yourself, and rewarding yourself is eating that healthy choice, and then eating, and then letting the guilt, letting the tabling the guilt doesn't come up, you know, you're not giving it the
And
opportunity.
just even applying two things that immediately come up for me from that is applying just what we've talked about so far, the evidence-based things, is for me also realizing that the way that my diet is structured, I can have that pizza and I'll be fine. And I objectively now know that I'll be fine because of the rest of it all. It's one pizza. It's the same way that one salad is not going to change anything. One pizza is not going to change anything. That's, we won't get into all those things. It's patterns.
And thank it
I
for
also,
sharing. And when if the guilt surfaces, thank it for sharing, because it doesn't mean anything,
yeah.
especially if we know that food is fuel. Now, there are times I talk with people and it's a very practical conversation. They're consuming 3,000 calories a day and they have a sedentary job like mine. And that is going to be, there's a formula there, like if you talk to any personal trainer and the fitness people, we have a lot of them out there, probably a lot of them in my group here who could possibly be listening to this, and they're going to tell you there's a science to it. I mean, eat less, move more, pretty much. And so
Yeah.
as a result, like, I will have practical conversations in my office with people about the fact that they want to lose weight, and they're, doing a lot of consuming, and they have a lot of difficulty regulating things, regulating their thoughts or regulating their emotions. And we do spend time talking about emotional dysregulation and other kinds of things too, in terms of what we're going over to help people and support people.
The other part that also surfaces for me, and you caught it onto it right away as the guilt comes up, is I I mentioned before, the concepts are really the things that I've been loving finding and following. And there was this kind of question: if you wanted to make a patient person, Would you give them everything really quickly? No, obviously. If you wanted to make somebody patient, you would make them wait for it. If you wanted somebody to be tough and resilient, you would give them hard things to go through. If you
Mhm.
want to get good at letting go of that guilty feeling, you have to practice letting go of that guilty feeling again and again and again. So I love the reframing of saying, you're feeling guilty, or I guess just in this case, I should own it and say, my feeling guilty of eating the pizza. I can reframe as this is an opportunity to learn to let it go. You may fail. You will
Mhm.
probably fail several times, and that is okay. But this is an
Mhm.
opportunity versus saying, well, that's it. I'm going to feel like shit for the rest of the day. That's not necessarily the case.
Whenever somebody proposes, they say cognitive behavioral therapists, we're notorious for giving homework. And I have found that, especially in a lot of settings where I have worked with people, giving them homework is like them not doing it and then them coming in feeling really bad that they didn't do it. So, but there are times when somebody says to me that they want to do something. And I say, I only want you to do it once, just once. And even if you have to be held by a militia at gunpoint to make sure that you don't, uh, you know, shop too much or eat too much or whatever. I want you to do it one time and then come back and tell me how you feel. Tell me what the thought. In other words, I want them to not say, I need to quit smoking and then expect them to just go out in their life. And I say, abstain from a cigarette for one 24-hour period. Come back and tell me what that's like and let's process that. And of course, in those type of situations, there is not going to be a delayed gratification, not yet, because they're probably going to feel a little worse. So there are certain times, and I'll want them to process that. That is gold for what I'm wanting to do with them, because then they have something to talk about and we can process it. Now, if I ask you to not have a pizza, there's that time frame thing. Is that going to matter in a week, a day, or a month? Probably an hour a day, or a month, or a week. It's probably not, because you're going to eat again. But the fact that you did it one time, you'll remember how you felt, and then I have something to help you reinforce the idea that you're going to make a healthier choice in what you eat the next time. How would you like to have that? Would you like to try that a second time? Would you like to try it another time? And of course, the other thing about it is there's going to be predictably 3 or 4 times where people could probably say, "Yes, I feel better. Yes, I feel better. Yes, I feel better." But then something's gonna come up, and it's gonna be really difficult for them. They're gonna wanna revert, or what they call the backslide, and
Mhm.
then, of course, that will, but we're prepared for that, and we can work through that and talk through that, when that particularly happens. So there's an expectation that at one point, they will have to revisit it or reckon with whatever it is that they're challenged with initially. That it will come up. They'll do it for a little while, and that's what happens, I think, in weight loss and other kinds of things, is that people can do it for a little while. Anybody can do it for a little while, but then eventually something is gonna churn. But there again, we want to get at that. What is that churning? What is that about? And be able to talk about it and explore it. And unless somebody gets into that zone, we won't have access to it, because they won't be able to describe it, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, from mine, at least understanding and viewing of a lot of this kind of stuff is almost this idea that I've coined as identity, meaning that if it's become part of my identity, I no longer have to ask. This is also partially based off of I think it was Tony Robbins or somebody that said, when somebody comes up and they're like, "I haven't smoked in 60 days," and he goes, "Why are you counting? Are you planning to smoke at 90 days? Like, what's the is
Yeah,
there a and then why are you counting? Just say you're not a smoker." It's all about
yeah, yeah.
identity. Um, with all of this, I want to bring it a little bit more back to stress and anxiety, and something that you would probably know better than I. I have thoughts and ideas around this, but just of what I observe. Are there things that you feel people aren't talking enough about in terms of sources of stress and anxiety kind of in the world, where you're going, I don't think people are realizing how much this is impacting them, and they're not really attributing to it. That many people are saying, well, it's my family, it's my job, it's my circumstance, but it might be something
Mhm.
completely different. One that jumps out for me immediately usually is social media, because I always see the drastic difference with how much people use social media and their stress and anxiety and moods. But you can go with that or any other things that you've noticed.
I I think that, when you're talking about it, that people do not realize, how much life has changed and how rapidly it has changed. And sometimes they are isolated and they don't realize it. They're not as apt to get out of the house as they were at one time. And of course, that movement and that ability to be out and about makes a difference. I was saying to somebody, it seemed to be a theme, like stores don't have the rush for Black Friday like they once did. And if you've known some of the people that that was an event. That was a ritual. In fact, up until the pandemic, it was so extreme. I thought this was a little extreme. They were going out on Thursday night because the stores were vetting them and saying we're running sales. Well, the pandemic hit and there's none of that. And I don't think it has ever gone back to that kind of a thing. But even the stores and the traffic don't have the rushes that they used to have at the malls and at other places. And so that's a change. But it also means that there's not the interactions and there's not and of course, the interactions that they always publicize, I know, were the fights over the one TV or the one teddy bear that was left, but at the same time, there was something about being out in the cooler weather and being out able to talk to people in the fresh air and looking forward to meeting for breakfast at 7 a.m. when they've all been out since 5 a.m. or whatever. Like there were different things that I remember, people doing. And it's not necessarily a negative thing that that's changed. I think I love how we can go online and buy things and we don't have to wait on a line and we don't, do some of the things that we did. At the same time, are we connecting with people? And I don't know that people are talking about that. I know entrepreneurs and business people really feel that isolation sometimes when they realize that nobody's coming. It's going to be about them, and there's natural anxieties that go with doing something new and trying different things and figuring out which things are going to work. So I think isolation is definitely one of them. I think that also too, there's a lot of, even, and this is for people who are business owners and in the workforce, at one time people felt very comfortable and they felt that they could do something for 30 years and get a gold watch. There would be a steady stream of income, and once they were hired, there wasn't going to be the mutability that we have now. Work life is very mutable and things can change and companies close and then they downsize and different things happen. And so they're looking, sometimes for how to create stability, and there is a way to do that, and it's a proactive approach to planning and managing money, and a proactive approach to having this idea, this concept, and being aware that there's a difference between needing to work and wanting to work, and really people learning how to set themselves up for that so that they know that they have plenty of money and they know that they're having that stability of an income, however they get that. And I'm not saying that people have to be an entrepreneur or they have to be on a pair. That's not, it's just, how do you plan for that? How do you know how to set that up so that you are in a good situation and you can feel good when you put your head on the pillow, because it operates in the background sometimes, you know especially when people hold mortgages, and especially when they have children who are in activities and college educations to pay for, things like that, and not having that plan in place. So I believe that is another factor too, is that isolation. I mean the steadiness of income and the having feeling that feeling of stability, that it's okay, everything's good, security.
Yeah, I definitely feel security is constantly there. And yes, to your point of, it feels that it's so much harder. It's not as simple as, well, go to school, do well, get a good job, you're good. That's it. You'll be set after that, and it's just no longer the case. At whichever point you want to intervene there, it could be at the job's not going to go that well because they're downsizing. It could be that you don't really need to go to school anymore. You might be able to just learn all of those stuff on YouTube or wherever else, and it's fine. There's options, which, to your exact point, some good things with that, but also some unstable and anxiety producing things with that. I want to go back to the loneliness, because I think the loneliness is important. We're doing this right now as a virtual live stream, and there is this piece of where so much more of it has become virtual interactions. And when I look at the majority of my interactions, virtual, I interact with very few people in real life consistently.
Mhm.
And part of that is also families and nuclear families, kind of everybody moving away. We're all over the country, and it just seems more and more that people are getting spread apart. Um, I'm wondering, from what you have done, do you see that virtual connections are, we know they're not nearly as good. I think I can go out and say they're not as good probably as in-person connections. You're not going to be able to connect as deeply in that case. But is there a remedy? Is there something we can do with virtual connections, or is it go out and find real friends?
Uh, well, my view of it is that you can connect meaning if you're connecting meaningfully with people, you can find them, and some of the deepest, dearest people to you may be people that you've met virtually because there is that connection. There's the power to be able to do that, and I think people even who are much younger than myself, because they kind of grew up that way, that they can do that and they know how to do that. I think also too, though, having a balance can be good. Having some people that we interact with and we do things with in person is important. And then the other part is, that it's called social self-care. When we identify and spend time with people who we genuinely like and they like us, they just understand us, they get who they are, we can laugh together, and there's just this really great, we think the same way, and then the other part of it is that they're people that we are on the same wavelength with. We like the same topics, and we don't think that talking about widgets is boring because we like it. But lots of people, our family, our friends, a lot of people we know, our neighbors may not like that. So they like us for who we are. We laugh together. We understand each other. And even finding those people who can move us along, the people that we move along, the people who move us along, and I think that that can be done virtually. I have hope about that, and I feel positively about that. At the same time, we still want to have a mixture of things. We still want to be able to be with people and connect with them because hugs are therapeutic. You know, Sitting across from somebody and having a conversation and feeling and experiencing their energy is really valuable.
We started doing a little while ago. My wife and I do 20-second hugs. At least they have to be 20 seconds. Because the science shows there's literal physiology. They are
Yeah,
therapeutic, quite literally.
yeah.
So yes, as much as you may not want to, go hug your relatives even on Black Friday for 20 seconds. It's good for
Exactly.
you. Be selfish about it. It's not for
The Ro-
them.
the Rolling Stones said it. If you can't be with the ones you love, love the ones you're with. Right?
There you go.
I
There
don't
you
think they
go.
meant what we're talking about, but you know what I mean. If yeah, be with people, be connected to people.
But to your point, there is a lot of value in it, of having a variety, because I have found being around a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of small business owners, and that's the constant audience and people that I'm around talking to day in and day out. If I'm on the train or somewhere else, because we're in San Francisco, we actually have good trains, which is not something I can say about the rest of the cities I've lived in. Anyway, uh, but I'll get into a small conversation with somebody, or somebody says something, and immediately my usual brain goes, "Oh, I wonder what business they're trying to start and what thing they're trying to grow and do." And the vast majority of the time, they're not. That they're just an employee of some company. They're just doing their thing. They may not have some kind of a bigger drive or anything. But I'm around so many people that are always doing that. That's my default. And
Mhm.
I realize that sometimes what I can learn from other people that don't have that is you can just you can chill. You can throttle it back. And for this 6 hours, this evening, you don't have to be thinking, I need to be on my phone as we're watching this movie and making sure that I'm, you know, DMing people and moving my business forward. You can just throttle back, and you can learn that from people that are not within the industry and things that you're doing for, because the feeling of missing out for me, I think that's incredibly anxiety producing for a lot of people, especially those that are trying to be high achievers and that are motivated by all the stuff that it's like grind 36/12 instead of 24/7, or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
um
Well, and
what are your thoughts?
yeah,
Go
and I
ahead.
think yeah, I was going to say fear of missing out is another one that I didn't mention, but I do believe that I hear people talking about that. And then the other one that I hear them talking about is imposter syndrome. Like if people only knew, and it's like, well, you know, Yeah.
Well, give me your take on imposter syndrome, because I think that that's one that's it's interesting and it creeps up. I think there's like little miniature versions of it that sometimes creep up where people wouldn't even label it imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
But something as simple as if somebody is standing in a line somewhere and they're like, "Hey, does anybody have a quarter?" And all of a sudden you're like, you know you have a quarter, and you're like, "I don't. They don't need my quarter. Nobody. Not, who cares about me?" Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You have a quarter you're willing to give up. Let's say you're willing to give it up, or
Mhm.
whatever it might be. Like sometimes people are just immediately just like, no, I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be heard. But what are your thoughts? What are your takes on imposter syndrome?
Well, I think that where I've seen that happen is when people have something, a thought that it, is not completely rational. You're not going to be able to act like you have 32 years of experience as a programmer when you don't have that. And you people, even if you are in a position of authority and you're a leader, um, that doesn't mean you have to know everything and be able to explain everything and account for everything. People do feel that they're judged in that way, or they're criticized, they're being evaluated that way sometimes, either at work or in their personal life. So it comes from that idea that there's something going on irrationally, and of course it provokes their anxiety because they're worried that if somebody discovers XYZ, they're going to conclude that they're faking it, or they're going to conclude that they led them down the crimson path, you know. And sometimes, oddly enough, when I have these conversations, it is about setting boundaries. It is about how people set themselves up, and they kind of talk to, even though it isn't spoken sometimes, the expectations, in other words. And being able to talk to people and talk that out actually can make it easier for both parties. Like, to say you're a small business person and somebody hires you, and the person has these expectations, and they're not going to happen. They want a website developed, and they want XYZ, and the developer knows, and rather than being able to say, here's what is a reasonable goal and a reasonable expectation. Let's work together. Let's look together, and let's move through this process together. And then what you're doing is you're guiding and you're setting up a framework so that the person, even if they do have that tendency to want to say, have these unreasonable expectations, you can still work with that. And then you're not feeling like, you shied away from it initially. And then of course it came back to have you look a certain way that you didn't want to look, that you, in other words, you're afraid, what your fears, become more real if it seems like you're looking like an imposter, or you didn't fulfill on something or meet an expectation, you know whether it's your own or other people's, because sometimes it is an internal thing, and people walk around with this idea, again, that they should have the same ability of somebody who's been doing something for 20 years when they've only been doing it for 20 months, so.
Absolutely. I'm trying to do almost the splits between two soapboxes. Can't decide which one I want to get on at this very moment. Um, One of the things that is a huge pet peeve for me, especially with small business owners, is when they use absolutes when they're describing what they do. Like when somebody who has just been a web designer for a little while, like you said, say like 20 months, and they're like, I'm going to make the best website for you. No, you're not. You're not. That's okay. You couldn't possibly. You don't. A huge giant company that I will pay $200,000 to, they will probably make the best website for me. You probably not the best website. But there is this imposter. I think the imposter syndrome jumps in there and says, well, but I can do a website. Great. But what are the other features? Why would I pick you? Maybe I can pick you because, yes, partially it's cheaper. Partially you get me. They are not going to understand me the way you're going to understand me. Okay, that's the selling point. Whatever else it might be, whatever those little things that are, you're going to do better than they do because they're a giant company and you're a smaller person who's able to kind of work one-on-one. That's always been kind of a thing for me when anybody says we give the highest quality, and I'm like, I don't think you do. Just gonna be
Yeah.
honest. I think
Yeah.
I think you try to provide the highest quality you are capable of. Great, that's a wonderful core value. It's not going to be the highest quality. It can't be. You're a small business.
Yeah. And the other thing is that what I was thinking of is that a seasoned person, somebody who's been doing a business for a while, hires somebody to do a website. But nowadays, I think that they can be kind of like headshots where you get them done frequently. Before you know it, you're going to want to revamp it or you're going to want to look at it again and have somebody work on it. And what you're looking for, like you said, is the person who can do the work and do a good job and capture what you're looking for them to capture, about your brand, your personality, or your audience, so that they can implement that into the website. So that if you're doing a website, but or whatever it is you're doing. So, yeah.
With that, I want to tiptoe back to my other soapbox, but actually pose it as almost a question for you. Uh, I, we were talking about imposter syndrome and these kinds of things where people kind of sometimes you do need to talk yourself up. You're not as pitiful and bad at what you do as you think you are. You're actually capable of so much more. And there's so many
Mhm.
people out there that are going like, say that you're the best. Talk like you're the best. Do all these things. And my only soapbox is when people are going like, I'm the greatest, I'm the best, and then you look at their stuff and you're like, okay, obviously not. Like it's not there. To your point, you're not going to have the experience and the abilities of a 32 year experienced person when you only have 20 months. You can't possibly do that.
Mhm.
Um, but I understand that for some people, it is a coping mechanism for a lot of anxiety that they have around this and around the imposter syndrome of feeling like, well, I have to talk myself up to say that I'm good enough. And enough people will believe if I just keep on telling myself this quote unquote lie. Can you, from that anxiety perspective of us trying to run away from the fear of people recognizing that we're not nearly that, can you unpack of how we would maybe approach and attack that? Maybe attack is too strong. That imposter syndrome kind of a thing of okay, what's a good way where we don't go completely off the deep end and now we're
Mhm.
almost just ridiculous with it.
Yeah. I think that one of them is understanding, where the insecurity is coming from, gathering a little bit of information about that. And that would be talking about it or writing about it to really understand the nature of of the insecurity that is involved in either overselling or underselling or leading us to that point where there's a feeling of imposter syndrome. The other thing that I also think, when I have somebody who is saying, how do I, stand in a group when I don't have experience and I know I don't I tell them, talk about one thing that you do well. Talk about the things that are your strengths because you will be being genuine. And that web developer that you're talking about, the website developer that you're talking about, can tell you after 20 months what they really do well or what they believe that they really do well. And that would be very genuine. And of course, would you be receptive and open to that and could see that? You could. And that could be the framework for which they can design the entire website for you on this idea of here is just something that I've noticed that I do really well. And I can definitely say that it's what had me become a website builder is because I know I can do XYZ for you. And then you can say to yourself, well, yes, I really want that. Like I really do, and some of that, if they're really good at that, if they're, having a if it's a sales conversation, they would learn to employ whatever it is that you're needing or wanting and then hit the pain point and then they would have you signing up like they'd have the sales conversation and do that based on what they're talented at, what they're good at, picking one or two things rather than saying I'm going to design the best, because what does that even mean? That's like could be it's almost like a generalization and it's almost like too broad of a picture that would make it hard to live up to. And of course,
Yeah.
some people may believe that it is the best, but will that hold water? For the even for the person, it probably is just a high expectation that they're setting. And those expectations are really linked to that anxiety. We build up this expectation, and then we never. It's like a perfectionism kind of thing, where it really, life is perfect every so often, and then there's the rest of the time when it isn't. And so that perfectionism can be, an issue. That tendency to want perfection or strive for perfection, you know.
I've got two final questions for you as we wrap up.
Sure.
The one thing we didn't touch on, we touched a little, not quite a bit on anxiety and how to handle the recurring things and all of that. Do you have anything that you would want that person that's in the middle of the I'm sweating, I'm breathing fast, my heart rate is racing, I'm in that moment. Is there something you would want if somebody's listening to this to remember in that moment that would be helpful to them?
I'm going to borrow from a respected colleague. His name is Dwight Bain. Last Friday, we were doing some training, and we had a lot of law enforcement and therapists there. We were doing it on school shooters, and he started the exercise or the school on school shooting by saying, "Okay, everybody, we're going to blow out the candles now." And for therapists, that is a term, and what that means is that you're going to inhale through your nose. You can do this with me, Steve. Inhale through your nose for and hold it for about 2-3 seconds, and then you exhale through your mouth. So you go and exhale through your mouth. And of course, that kind of breathing, when we're nervous, when we're having attention right at the moment, can be very valuable to help us calm down. And of course, a lot of things for anxiety, there's a whole set of skills, and they involve things like breathing, different types of breathing, and progressive muscle relaxation. So, those kinds of self care, those kinds of gentle techniques that are very self soothing are things that are very agreeable with people.
hmm I am so glad because my hypothesis for asking the question was do something physiological, meaning breathe, move, do
Mhm.
something there because in that moment, you are probably not going to be able to think your way out of that situation.
Yeah.
You need to do something else.
And you can actually do that in your interactions with people. That's exactly what the therapist Dwight Bain did. Is that he said in this presentation you're going to see some things you're not going to be able to unsee. You're going to hear some things you're not going to be able to unhear. So I'm going to be asking you to do that at a couple of intervals. He started it at the beginning and then he did it at a couple of times, and it made it for a really effective interaction, a really effective talk, and a very knowledgeable, experience for everybody. So yeah, and we can employ those things, and they're very simple to use. So yeah.
My final question for you is after a 20-second hug, what
Mhm.
do you wish somebody would have told you 10, 20, or more years ago?
That we, I think that I don't have to hold on to and carry with me the things that I have for as long as I have. The ability to learn how to release what we don't need, what doesn't serve us anymore, and really doing an inventory. I think now at this point in my life, I've always used gratitude. I've always used cognitive restructuring in my own morning routine. And now I've added forgiveness. And one of the things about forgiveness is that it really gives that release. And it impacted a colleague of mine said, "Oh, all my people are spiraling." And I thought, well, my tribe right now in the different settings where I am, they're actually releasing because I've been that clearing for that because I'm doing that. And doing that forgiveness work involves a lot of compassion, a lot of acceptance, and a lot of the ability to not carry around things that we don't need. And you know what's interesting about things like eating, weight loss and things that hang on like addictions, when we're not carrying around some of that stuff, it's interesting how they get affected, how it impacts them. They lighten up. Things we can sometimes release or give up an unhealthy habit or a habit that's linked to a guilt cycle when we are doing that releasing every so often. And I was fascinated because I was reading something online about Chinese medicine about how fall, for example, is a time of release. It's a time for being able to release as you're getting ready for winter, and then of course the renewal that will occur as we circle around through the seasons. But yes, being able to have that ability to release regularly, and I don't think I learned that at a very young age. I think that I grew to that, and especially when it became so heavy that I felt like I had difficulty carrying it, then I would kind of let a little bit kind of leak out or I kind of let a little bit go. But that would be one thing, is really, and we can teach our children at a young age and teach younger people to just really begin to visualize releasing, really begin to realize practicing letting go of things that we no longer need or no longer serve us. And sometimes some of the things that people talk about are things that they used at one time to survive or to get through a situation, and they're old skills. They don't need them anymore. And I will talk with them sometimes. You are free to let go of that skill and learn something new and try something new, add more to your repertoire. It's not going to go away if you stop doing that, whatever that skill is. So I do believe the ability to do that. The other thing I think in the journey of forgiveness is, one of the things that happens is it brings us back to ourself, especially after that 20-second hug. We realize that the main person that we really need to forgive all of this a lot of times is ourselves, if that makes sense. We're kind of instilled as we're born with this idea we're egocentric. It's about us, and we're having to really forgive some of these big burdens, by in a journey of understanding ourselves and getting closer to who we are and actualizing ourselves.
Yeah. Beautiful answer. I have to also be better and better at forgiving myself. You're absolutely right. I think yeah, sometimes we take it on, be that as siblings, be that as if you've ever had to be a caretaker for a parent or anybody else. And it just, yeah, a lot of those things we feel that, well, we have to do it. We have to do it. We have to do it. And then after a point, it's sometimes not our fault. With that, you're going to have to forgive me because I potentially lied. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
if people are going, wow, the way Anne said that, I really want to know more about the techniques. Oh, I just like the way she puts it. I feel like she's got the right wording for me. Where can people find more of you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn. I have a tag that is definitely makes me identifiable. It's from a long time ago when people were putting things at the end of it. They call it the success genie. It's not necessarily because I'm an imposter or I have any cornering the market on success done. And somebody said that might be a nice thing for me to say or put. And so it identifies me. I'm on Facebook. I have a coaching program. I have a little gift for people online. I'm also I opened a channel as of today. I'm starting it on the Great Discovery for people who want to have interactions with with this kind of material ongoingly. And the basic uh, um, channel part is free to join. And then I'm going to have some paid versions of that, some of them that are group and some of them that are one-on-one. So there are plenty of ways to interact with me. And if anybody would like to, there's a link on my LinkedIn profile. If anybody would like to have a one-on-one consultation, a connection call with me, I would love to be able to do that with them. So I'm happy to connect.
Brilliant. And even though she won't give you a 20-second hug, you can sit there in silence for 20 seconds. I don't know, hug the camera, or just have a good conversation. So there you go. And thank you for joining. Thank you for going deep with some of that stuff. I appreciate it. I think it is some of the things we're not talking about. I really especially like that you were bringing up loneliness and imposter syndrome, which I think are ever present and we don't address them enough. So
Yep.
thank you. And to
Thank
the
you,
rest of
Steve.
you, yeah, good
Stephanie.
night
Yeah.
and happy end of Thanksgiving, at least for those in the States. Cheers.
Yeah. Take care.